And we're live, so welcome everyone to another edition of our community call. We'll do the usual where our team will go over our progress and then we'll go to open questions. From my end, I've been working some more on the bridge rewrite. We are really getting closer. Um, we have most of our blockers closed now. We have some work with Jitsi, um, and some work with garbage collection that we're doing now. So we discovered that with the new code, we get freezes due to garbage collection that are too long. So we have maybe 300 millisecond pauses during which we drop packets. So that's too long, and we're just trying to figure out uh, what's the best combination of memory management on our side and configuration of the JVM. Once we figure out what it is, we should be able to merge. Um, we know that we are in a better position than the current master because we're only allocating about half the objects that master is for the same load. So we just need to figure out which configuration works best. So I'm hoping that sometime next week we'll be getting there. The NLJ JVP branch that has the new bridge doesn't have any unmet dependencies. You can just check out the branch and build the bridge. Everything that is required is in the Maven repo, so it's available for testing already. That's everything from me. Thanks, Paul. Brian is off right now. He'll be off for a few more days or weeks, but I'll make sure to pass this along.
Cool, really exciting.
Right. Peter, this conference is live on being live streamed to YouTube right now. I'll see about getting the link in a second. So let's proceed with the rest of the team. Saul, do you want to go next?
I guess, yeah. So for the past couple of weeks, I have done quite a bit of work on the many Android SDK shenanigans. If I were to highlight something, I think it's the fact that we now have a flag that allows to make a Libre build of the Jitsi Meet app. So this build type doesn't include any analytics, any crash reporting, any proprietary Google libraries. And what's going to happen hopefully soon, and I'm in touch with the guys, is that Jitsi Meet is going to be available on F-Droid. So whenever we release to the store, a build will be triggered on F-Droid with this Libre build flag set. So it is available there for those who want to use it. The things to fix before the hour, and then I think this is pretty much all that was missing for an F-Droid build to be possible. So we're there now, and that's me, I think.
Who's next?
Then I can go next. It's okay. I've been mainly working on Spot in the last 2 weeks. We are going to release an Electron version of Spot that was needed for a few reasons. Few of them are to, or one of them is to provide some native functionality for Spot. For example, native volume control for the host OS and Bluetooth beacons and all these things. the next 2 weeks will be mainly about this as well.
Jacob?
I don't have any real updates from my side of things since last.
I'm just going over the thumbnails. That's my order. Damien?
Mainly looking at some GGASs, monitoring those that are running for me, Jitsi, and enabling cool stats there.
Cool. Aaron?
Yeah, most of my work for the open source is around new auto-scaling rules for Meet Jitsi so that we will scale up more quickly since we were seeing some overloadness on our production bridges, but that's about it.
That reminds me, just last week or the week before, we changed the way that Gcoffer does load balancing. So instead of the video stream estimation, it uses the current bitrate of the bridges. So the result is that the bitrate is evenly distributed right now. There is a downside if we migrate conferences from one bridge which failed. And that's something that we'll be addressing in the future. Christo? George?
Yeah, not much for me here either. I've been fixing some bugs, mostly minor ones in the new bridge, focused around adaptivity, RTX, Firefox support, and things like that. Yeah, that's for me.
Lenny?
I believe since the last meeting, the chat redesign has been deployed. For Jitsi Meet and for Spot, I did general bug fixes and UX improvements.
And then Pavel?
I think it was mostly bug fixes, some of mobile. There was a crash which was happening when the app was requesting permissions initially. But other than that, I don't think I have anything else interesting for the community.
Yana?
Oh, I don't think I have, yeah, in the past 2 weeks, if I have done anything. Maybe what I'm planning to do is to do some more work on spot designs. That's on my to-do list for the foreseeable future.
And Emil, do you have anything to add?
Nothing to add. I guess I had two questions, one for you and one for the community. The one for you, and I'm sorry if you have updated people here on that, but do we want to emit currently an estimate of when we believe the community call would be hosted on New Bridge?
Oh, I don't really have an estimate for that. I am hoping that we can do the merge next week or the week after.
Okay, that sounds like potentially not next call, but the one after has good chances of being a New Bridge.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, fingers crossed. Everyone, this is non-contractual, so just I know that many people were interested in this, so hopefully this gives you a sense of how we're thinking about it. And then I was wondering if anyone in the community here knows what Spot is, and if you all are interested in that work, and to what level. I'd love to hear any feedback there.
Is that the tool to manage like scheduling of conference rooms and things like that? Is that what Spot is?
Kind of, sort of, yeah. It is for conference rooms. It doesn't really manage scheduling. It basically just lets you equip a conference room with, you put a dedicated computer there with audio, video devices. You run the Spot app or the Spot page in full screen. And then you have a separate controller, usually a tablet, Android or iPad. I guess not a Huawei, too soon. And then you use that tablet to control the meeting, to start, to mute, unmute, share desktop, all of that. The point being that this lets you equip a place in a way that's user-friendly, that doesn't require mucking with a keyboard and a mouse and that sort of stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That sounds really interesting.
So is that something that in general people here on this call are struggling with? Is that a request that some of you here often want to do? Or has that been mostly, you would say, on the lower end of things priority-wise that you would like Jitsi to do for you?
I think it's useful. It's probably not as high priority as the new bridge, some of the lower level improvements, but I certainly think that there's useful functionality there. I'll definitely look into it more.
So Paul, you think that you would deploy that and use that if it existed?
I think so. I think we would have use for that.
You would.
I'd have to look through it more.
Is that just on your first impressions? Is that something that you believe you would use kind of internally as a conferencing tool, or more like as part of whatever else you're doing with Jitsi that would also fit there?
I think potentially both. You know, I think we haven't really gotten too far in the area of a dedicated machine. But that does sound like, you know, it definitely has come up in discussions, product discussions and such. So I think that would be interesting.
And just to be clear, we're talking about a dedicating machine running Jitsi Meet, not the bridge, right? We're on the same page, correct?
Yeah, like an iPad in a room that's locked down, right?
Well, the iPad is just going to run the remote, and then some generic purpose computer, like a Mac Mini or an Intel NUC, will actually run basically a Chrome or an Electron, and that's where Jitsi Meet will be.
I see. So the iPad is running a web app, not a React Native app. Got it.
It might be a React Native or not, but it's not Jitsi Meet itself. It's just a remote control.
I see. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
Thanks for sharing the feedback. Just to be clear and completely transparent, we haven't yet decided exactly how the open source aspect of this would work. It was rather complicated to think through everything with full backend support being open source and generic. So at this point, our stance is that we're going to open source the clients, and people can do whatever backends work for their needs, or use the one that's on Meet Jitsi, kind of like we've been doing with the conference mapper so far. But this is still in the vague thoughts phase. We still have to see exactly how we're going to manage that.
Oh,
anyways,
so it's Spot it's just basically the UX that leverages the remote control, but then there's another module that gets deployed on a dedicated sort of conferencing machine. Is that how that works?
Well, there are two front-end pieces, one that basically runs on the TV in your conference room, and a second one that runs on your remote control. Those are front-end apps. And then there's the whole back-end, part of which runs on Prosody, part of which is entirely new stuff that helps you pair new remote controls to an existing room, that helps remote controls talk to the to the actual computer running the meeting. I guess we should just do a presentation of the entire architecture once we push it out.
Yeah, yeah, that would be cool.
All right.
That's interesting.
We have I suppose a couple of months ahead of us before we're ready for at least one, probably 2 months ahead of us before we're ready for this. But yes, good to know that there's some interest. And if anyone else is also interested and wants to hear more details, we could probably talk about it the next call to answer questions.
And one idea, Emil, is to, because you were talking about the open source aspect being, we're still thinking about it, would be to do the architecture like you speak of and then ask how people might want to consume it as open source consumers when we get there to help input and drive that decision.
Yeah, we could probably do that. Nothing else from me.
Okay, let's move on to open questions.
I have a question about follow up kind of on the RTT stuff that I brought up last call. So one thing we noticed so we have a mode in which we just run audio, we don't run video. And in that case, I realized that the RTT calculation doesn't happen by default. But there's also the end-to-end ping. So my first question is the stats that show up like in the film strip where it shows each participant's RTT, that's just from the data channel based end-to-end ping, right? That timing. And is there does it make sense for us to leverage the sort of the calculation that happens with bandwidth estimation on the video side? Or because the main reason we're using this is to sort of help with just syncing of things. And so we want to get a relative approximation for each participant's round trip time. So is there one that would be recommended to use over the other, and or would it make sense just to sort of force RTT calculation to happen in an audio only mode?
Are you saying that the end-to-end round trip time is not shown without video?
Not that way. There's a general calculation that happens. I have to look it up real quick. That seems to only happen in video RTCP termination. For audio, it never gets called. I think just because it's tied to one of the bandwidth estimations, and I noticed in testing that it doesn't actually, I think intentionally, get called if you just have an audio channel. So in a case of an audio only mode, it looks like that method of calculate RTT doesn't actually get called. But we can just use, the end-to-end ping, I think, is something that's configurable to turn on and off. So if we just enable that, maybe that makes it a simpler thing to use. But I was just curious, since there's kind of a few different ways of doing getting roughly the same metric. Is there one that would be better to use over another?
Right. Well, the end-to-end one might be a little confusing, because if you just look at it, you're not able to tell which endpoint is the one that has a long round trip time. So if you want just a leg from a participant to their bridge, you can always get that from the ICE pair that is used. I'm not sure how it's exposed, but it's somewhere in the stats.
Hmm.
I guess there's another one for the video channel that is used somewhere. I don't remember anymore. But even without video, you should be able to get it.
Yeah, it would have to go. So you would recommend, because that would be the most ideal if we just got one leg specifically, yeah, from participant to the bridge, or vice versa. Um, you recommend using the ice, getting it from ice as opposed to using the video channel.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm not sure what we have in the library right now, though.
It makes sense to me as well because your observations are correct that we don't calculate, we don't have artistic determinations for audio. So if you don't have video traffic, um, more so if you don't have any video channels or video SRCs, then we don't compute anything. We don't compute an RTT for
Right.
in the bridge. So ICE RTT, if you can get it from the stats, that would be the best option, I think.
But from what I could tell, getting it from, so that's what we try to do, get it from the stats, but that doesn't get populated unless you have a video channel. So if there's only an audio channel, then it never updates the media stream stats or whatever.
They also have a connection stats somewhere. At least in the old stats, the legacy stats, they had it. So they have a connection. They have an object connection stats, and there you get an RTT that's independent from the video stream RTT or the audio stream RTT. I'm not sure if it's in the new promise-based stats though, if you can find it there.
Yeah, do you know where that is offhand?
It's Google connection stats or something.
Connections stats. I don't see. I see. Yeah, I only see endpoint connection status. Most probably not it. Is that in Jitsi Video Bridge, or is that?
That would be in the peer connection stats.
Pure connection stats.
Which I'm not sure that we expose. Yeah, that's another complication. I'm not sure whether we expose that, whether we provide access to this kind of statistics from the user application. Does anybody know if we expose that to the user application, the WebRTC stats?
Which one
Probably
again,
not.
George?
The WebRTC stats from the peer connection, either the
What
promise-based or the thing that you get from calling get stats in the peer connection.
Yeah, but what is the attribute that you want to know if it is or not?
I think there is an attribute called Google connection something something, and it contains various information about the connection, like RTT. That's the one we're interested in.
Sorry, I just lost you for a sec. Do you mind repeating that real quick? I don't know if I got disconnected or if you did.
Yeah, we're looking whether we expose the WebRTC stats to the user application. Probably we don't. So it's going to be complicated to get the ISRTT from us.
Well, it could. I mean, it wouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't mind kind of doing a little voodoo to expose it. If that's the best stat to use, it's not a huge deal because we've already extended a few things in Video Bridge. So just to get some of this data.
We don't expose it, but maybe one thing you could do is like the same way call stats wraps the global peer connection to sort of know things. Maybe you could do that. Like replace the get stats method in the prototype to basically undo stuff and then let it flow. so you can do things on the side of the application, perhaps. Maybe that makes sense.
Oh, I think so. You're saying exposing these things from the Jitsi meet side, the JS side, the front end side. Is that what you mean? Is that
Yeah,
where?
yeah.
Okay.
That's what everyone is suggesting so far.
Okay, I see. I see. We've mostly been getting at it from the Jitsi video bridge side, but yeah, maybe it does make more sense to do it from the front end. I see. Okay, that's why I couldn't find it. Um, so you're saying the RTC pure connection is that stats that are in that class?
So if you go to WebRTC internals right now, you will see that you have an object named con-audio-1-0. And in there, so I'm using the legacy stats, right?
Okay.
And in there you have a bunch of properties, including the RTT.
Right. I see.
So this should be the ice level RTT.
Got it. I see. So I would just need to fork something on the Jitsi meet side to expose that, and then pass that to basically send that from a data channel message, and pass that to the JVB because we would need it on the JVB side. But I see what you're saying. Okay. Okay. And do you mean like the Goog RTT? Is that how it shows up in Chrome? Is that the
Yeah,
way?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does it show up as something different in other browsers, or is always represented by the same property?
So other browsers would be Firefox, and I think they use by default the standards-based, promise-based stats, and I'm not sure how to get it there.
I think it's similar, except in Chrome, if you scroll to the top of the page, there's a drop down now that allows you to switch between the legacy and new promise-based API. If you use the new one, again, you find the candidate pair, and there's a property code, current round trip time. I think that's a standards compliant way to do it now.
Okay, that's great. Awesome. All right, well, thank you. That's helpful.
And Damien just told me that this is not available when Chrome stable, it's just in Canary. Being able to switch in the interface, that is.
Okay. Does that mean we shouldn't rely on it?
No, the stats API is there. It's just only exposed in the WebRTC internals interface in Canary. Should be good to use that.
I see. I see. Okay. Cool. All right, we'll try that out. See how that goes.
Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Kaidon from Comcast. So I have two questions. I keep hearing about new bridge in the conversation. So can you talk about more about new bridge? What's the new function of the new bridge? Yeah.
Yeah, so a few months ago, we started a project where we are rewriting big chunks of the video bridge in order to stop using some legacy code that we were using and in order to be able to improve performance. That pretty much replaces libjitsi with new code. So we have a completely new RTP stack and a new pipeline for handling RTP packets. Those are two new projects in uh, on GitHub. The link to libjitsi is not completely broken. We're still using some code there, but it's minimal. And I'm not sure what else you need to know right now. I'll send you the link in a second.
Okay. And so related to this issue, do we need a new Gigofo to talk with a new bridge?
No. If you're using
Okay.
Gigofo, you will need to update to master because of minor things that prevent interoperability, but there's nothing major. If you are
And
using a modified version of Gcov for your own focus implementation, you might run into problems,
okay.
mostly around endpoint IDs.
And I remember you guys working on like a Kotlin based libgts. So it's a new GT new bridge use the use a new libgts library. I mean a Kotlin based.
Yep. So the two new libraries, the RTP library and the media transform library, are both written in Kotlin.
Okay, it's cool. So when will be the new bridge ready? Next week?
Possibly. That's what we're hoping for. But we've been saying that for a while. So we're
And
making progress.
okay, another question about the unified plan. So is a new bridge support a new does a new bridge support a new unified plan?
Not yet.
Okay. So do you have
So,
any some
so
kind of
to clarify, it doesn't support simulcast based on RIDs.
yeah,
If the browsers end up supporting the new unified plan, but allow us to still have access to the SSRCs, everything should just work with the new bridge and the old bridge. But that's to be determined. Fine.
so but it doesn't fully support the new I mean a Chrome unified plan yet, right?
It doesn't support the RID way of doing simulcast.
Not just for RRD. For example, the new plan you have multiple video, the SDP change or kind of unified plan changes.
Yeah, so there's two major changes with unified plan. One is the SDP, and that's only on the client, so the bridge doesn't really care about it. And the other part is on the wire, whether the multiplexing is done based on SSRCs or RIDs.
Yeah. So it is support which one support for new bridge?
Nope, we don't have any support for RIDs yet.
Okay. So so do you have some kind of timeline for this support?
I'm not aware of any timelines. We were hoping to be able to do the change on two stages, where we do the change in the client first and use unified plan in the client, but still use SSRCs on the wire.
Yeah.
And as a second stage, move to RIDs. But I don't really know what's going on in the plan there.
Okay. Okay. But I assume for the unified plan, we also need to change the Gigofo, right?
I don't know anyone else.
Hopefully not. For the first stage, I would say no, because it would look similar to the way things are done in Firefox now. But to add to what Boris just said, the jury is still out on RID and stuff to begin with because the current state is pretty bad. Basically, there is no way to do simulcast. Sorry, let me say this again. So there's no way to migrate to unified without migrating at the same time to RIDs, which forces everybody to update their bridges to do RID there, which is not something that browsers, it's not a reasonable thing to ask of people to do. So I forgot who, but was writing a draft to keep SSRCs in the single link so we can still do simulcast, let's say the old school ways, quote unquote, and then the migration can be done as Boris mentioned in 2 stages. If Emil is still here, I think he remembers what the draft name is. But otherwise, that's the current state of affairs, let's say.
So the reason I asked the question because right now the SDP is sent from session initiated from Gopher, right? And with unified plan, the SDP will be changed. So I think Gopher may need some change.
It is possible, but I think that not necessarily. The conversion from Jingle, happens on the client. We can probably deal with it.
Oh, you mean a client
on the
SDK? Your
receiving
client. Okay, gotcha. You mean a client does the conversion?
Yeah, the part that does the
Okay.
conversion from Jingle to SDP can take care of this. I think it is not impossible that changes are needed. I'm pretty sure that when RID is added, changes will be needed. But I am hopeful at least that we will be able to go to UCs and do RID later. So with a 2-stage thing, the migration to Unify should be transparent.
So with a new bridge, so do you guys have plan to test a unified plan with Google Chrome? With Spatula,
As I
you mean in
said,
Google Chrome, you guys have a
when
flag, right?
no, it's a constraint. So at this point, the plan, pun intended, is that we modify the client code to use Unify with SSRCs in the SDP, and then the bridge needs no changes at all. And then we have in the libgc need code, there is a thing where you say, what was the name? SDP. There's a thing to select what plan you want. And right now it is set to plan B. The idea would be to change that to unified and no changes on the bridge, and life moves on. And then we do the RID stuff. For the RID stuff, changes will be needed, but unified without RID because otherwise there's just too many moving parts and hell will break loose. So, but again, that's the jury's out on these SSRCs on the SDP thing. I think Chrome has removed them in 74, which means unless they bring them back, everything will need to happen at once.
So
So
basically,
more info is
your
needed.
team plans to deploy a new bridge first and then test the unified plan later.
Exactly. Yeah. Correct.
Okay. So hopefully we can get a new bridge soon, so we can try out. Yeah. Yeah, that's from my side. Yeah, thank you.
Peter?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I have 2 questions. The first one is about Octo or cascading, geographical cascading. I just want to know how do you manage the security and the communications between all the Jitsi video bridges?
Right now, we just make sure that we have a secure network on the IP level between them.
All right. So the Jitsi video bridges have to be installed within a secure infrastructure, right?
Yep.
No. All right. The second one is about a feature on Jitsi Meet called offstage layer suppression that goes with simulcast. I read about it on your website. I'm gonna send you the link just right here. It means that on as a client on Chrome, I sent three resolutions to the Jitsi video bridge rights, and this feature helps to consume less bandwidth from a client side. But I noticed that it doesn't work with my deployments, and it doesn't work with meet.jit.c either. Is it normal?
Yes. With Octo, since we don't have signaling between the bridges, at least we don't have it right now. There's no way to know whether your video is being consumed on the client side. So
All
this
right.
feature is just disabled.
So this is with Octo, but without Octo, it's supposed to work, right?
I think so.
That's strange because I don't have Octo in my deployment. I tried it with the latest version of Chrome and it doesn't work. And I tried it even on meet.jit.c and it doesn't work. I see that on the tab WebRTC internals that my browser sends the same resolution and uses the same bandwidth. I used it with another participant.
Hmm.
I think
I
there were some
guess.
rough edges. Brian will know better, but um, I think there were bugs and issues around that. There was a constraint to use a specific version of Chrome, and below that version wouldn't work, but we're well beyond that version now. It has hit stable. I think the requirement was Chrome 69 or Chrome 70,
Mm-hmm.
but but apparently something is broken and it doesn't work as expected.
All right. So I'll let you know on the forum. I'll make a test and send you the screenshots.
Perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's all from me.
I have some questions. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great, thanks. So first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but the last meeting was not recorded May 6th. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, no problem. A few questions here. Is it possible for a participant that is sharing their screen to also still be seen by the other people, the other participants? I know one way around it is if you log in on another device and maybe use the other device for sharing your screen. But is there a way that you can do both at the same time at this point?
Currently, no. In the current cost base, no.
Currently, no. Okay, but so that is a workaround. Just have another device where you're sharing your screen there, and then people could see that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Also, could multiple people be sharing their screen at the same time instead of their face?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Now let's say we create 3 rooms and we've got it embedded in our system. Can we display which ones are vacant, like 0 current participants? Is there an API for that or something? Are you aware?
Damien, do you remember we had the conference size API?
Yeah, there is a procedure module which you can enable, which basically allows you to query for the room participants for a room. It's code max size. It's in the code, and this needs to be enabled by hand. And basically, you can HTTP query it, asking for the size of that room.
Could you write that name in the text, if you don't mind? So
I will send it in the chat, the link to the module.
fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so then it is possible if we have these rooms, so then the users could see which one is vacant, and then maybe they could go in there, right? If they want to create a little one-on-one or something, or one-to-many conversation. The SDK that is used for Jitsi mobile app do you guys know if is that open source and available as well somewhere?
Yeah, sure is.
And
it's the same project actually.
Oh, really? And it can be customized and uploaded to the store potentially as a separate app?
Yeah, so you have two things you can do there. So um, the Jitsi Meet repo is actually right now the source for three different things. Well, times, yeah. So one is the Jitsi Meet website that you're used to when you go to Meet Jitsi, so the front end for the conference. But it is also the mobile app, which uses React Native. So it uses JavaScript for all the internal logic. But then the mobile apps are kind of just a very thin wrapper around the mobile SDK, which is a native SDK for mobile. If you go to a repo called Jitsi Meet SDK examples that we have on GitHub, you have some Android and iOS native apps that embedded the SDK to integrate this meeting functionality. And there's documentation for both Android and iOS on how to build the SDK by hand. So if you modify the JavaScript files to do something else or look something somewhat different, you can build the artifacts and deploy them to your own, whatever, Maven repo in case of Android, or different CocoaPods, and create an app of your own and publish it to the store. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, that's fantastic. It's good to know. I mean, that's something that we're ready to do right now, but but in the future. Regarding the desktop app, is it possible that it can be customized so that there is an API that grabs the existing username? Because on our system, we have a database of users and little mini profiles of who they are, their name, their occupation, interests, and so forth. And so we need to have a way of taking, who are the participants in a discussion, and be able to just pass that particular username to our system so that we can show the people some more information about who's talking. So the question is there a way to grab the username? Let's say you click on the username. Is there a way that we can have an output of that, to our system? Are you guys still there?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Anyone else?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Can you help me understand your use case a little more? So are you imagining that a user in the user interface would make a click inside the Jitsi Meet user interface, but that you would somehow be displaying extra information that's coming from a third-party source?
Exactly, yeah. So right
Okay.
now, like if
No,
you
we
go
have
to a
nothing
file,
like that today.
yeah. And I have a developer who would be willing to help, if there's a way. I don't know if this is something that we could do to, I mean, right now we have a workaround. So like when somebody logs into our system and where Jitsi is embedded, it will automatically, and then they come into the Jitsi room, it will automatically say what their username is. But so you see it on the screen, they don't have to type in their name. It's actually there already, their username and their real name. But we don't have a way of getting that out, by clicking on it. So we have a little box underneath that says enter username to get their mini profile. So you have to basically physically write that name in there, press enter, and then the mini profile will appear. But it would be nice if you could just click on somebody or even hover over them and the mini profile appears. Does that make sense?
Yeah, at the moment we have nothing in the Jitsi Meet code base that would allow for that I'm aware of. Probably in a custom deployment, you could just inject extra JavaScript into the page that performs all those actions. The data that gets exposed per user, if the users are joining with tokens, which is the way we handle this in a lot of corporate settings, the user first authenticates against a third-party system and is given a token that will allow them to authenticate against the Jitsi system. And that token also includes some of their personal information, their avatar URL, their display name, etc., as well as some unique IDs. And then those IDs could potentially be used from the presence in order to make other actions. But there's a number of components there. You'd have to have the tokens working. You'd have to generate tokens for your user and instead have them join via those tokens. And your backend would have to trust those tokens. And then you'd have to do all of the JavaScript necessary to expose all those details. So there's nothing that you could just easily do to plug in at the moment for that I'm aware of.
Right. Is that something that could easily be done on the meet.jitsi? Like, let's say I even offered one of my developers to help out if you guys are too busy. Is that something that maybe they could work on a copy and let you know what lines of code need to be added, and then you guys upload them? Is that possible or not?
I'd say that in general, yeah. I mean, it's an open source project, so of course you can fork it, make changes, and contribute them back. I guess the question is like how to make this generic enough so that it makes sense for use cases other than yours.
Because what you're imagining right now is that you have a central identity provider and that every user that uses the system would somehow have access both to query that provider as well as to be able to be a user within it and authenticate themselves. So there's a number of sort of generic components there: an identity provider, a user's credentials, some amount of trust that if a user's coming in with that name, you actually only that user could come in with that name so that people can't impersonate each other. Once you have identity associated, you have a lot of other issues that come up that anonymous systems don't need to. And Jitsi Meet in general has done, we've tried to keep the identity thing separated. So I'd be happy to have discussions with your developer about the best way to do that in a generic fashion, but it's not just going to be they write some script and we upload it. They'd have to look at the Jitsi Meet project, look at the changes they'd want to make a PR, make a proposal, have a conversation with us, and then we could potentially go over it. But there'd be there's some architecture that needs to be decided on first that I'm not sure we'd
and my developer,
we'd want to be involved with that.
My developer's much more technical than me. So how would he get in contact with you?
I mean, you can have him join a community call. You can have him ask questions on community.jitsi.org. Those are probably the two best ways.
All right, we'll put this. I already have that question, I think, somewhere, but I'll make sure that I put it up again.
Okay, and if you need attention on a question too, feel free to ping me. This is Aaron Van Meerten. You're welcome to ping me. I'm intermittent on there, but if I get a direct ping, I try to respond to it quickly.
So okay, just there's a way to ping you by your name.
Yeah, you can just mention me, I believe, and I'll be referenced and get an email.
Oh, mention. Okay, no problem. One last thing. If we were to actually create our own version of Jitsi, I guess, do we need to have a dedicated server for this? Any idea what the hardware requirements are for it? And second question related to this is, if we do that, does that also enable us to white label it so that the words Jitsi and Slack are not visible externally? I guess they might still be internal on the code, but not to users.
I'd say that if you make this change, you're probably changing the Jitsi source code itself. So of course you will need to deploy to your own infra. And then since you're deploying it to your own infra, you are of course allowed to remove the logos and every mention to Jitsi Slack or anything. For people who use our existing deployment by embedding it with the iframe, we kindly request to not remove them in exchange for the free service. It's a gentleman's agreement, if you will.
Yes, and I saw that and respect that. I just wish it was written a little bit smaller and more discreet, maybe at the bottom, powered by jitsi.org, rather than kind of so big.
Yeah, I don't know. What can I say? It is what it is.
Okay, but that's good to know. That's good to know. I think that's it for my
Yeah,
question.
and to answer your question about what size of server, it really is going to depend on what kind of bandwidth needs you have, how many users you have, all of that. I mean, we run this across tens of servers across 6 regions and do sort of auto scaling type operations. So it really is just going to depend on the scale of your customer base, how much you're going to spend.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's something I'll want to explore in the future. But for now, we're very happy just to use the existing system. And our link is just a manual one, you know. So like I said before, people will see who's talking when they log in through our URL, through our domain. They everybody has to have a unique user ID, you know, from or username from the sign up process. And then when they go into the audio video room, it says who that user ID is. We figured that part out, who's talking. And people just have to manually type that name into a little box in order to see the mini profile. But from there, they can see, you know, who is the person, their occupation. They can chat with them privately on our own system. They can even chat publicly. There's a number of things they can do. But it's just the link, you know, is kind of not there automatic. Somebody has to type it in.
Thank you. Anybody else? Going once, going twice. I'm stopping this live stream. Thank you for participating and see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,